Hello and welcome to the Happy Days LinkedIn Live with my co founder, Agis. Hello, Agis. How are you?
Hello, Celia. I'm good. How are you?
And we have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Nikos Mavridis from MIT, PhD from MIT. Mr. Mavridis is actually based in Dubai, and he is an early innovator of robotics and artificial intelligence long before the rest of us even knew things were happening, and long before things were fashionable. Mr. Mavridis was there doing it, advising enterprise level companies on AI due diligence and building robust systems. And we are delighted to have him here today with us to discuss from AI to ROI. And first of all, a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Mavridis.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be speaking to you.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. And let's start. When we spoke, I realized that you have a very interesting background, and I'm always interested. What sparked your very first interest in working with technology and artificial intelligence specifically?
So when I was a 3-year-old child, I guess that one of my favorite toys were the toy pianos, and I enjoyed not only playing on the piano, but also, of course, opening it to see how it works, but also trying to make it make new sounds that nobody could imagine could be done through a toy piano. Later, when I started, reading Mickey Mouse and watching cartoons, my favorite hero was Gyro Gidlus, or Kyros Granadis as it is in Greek, who is the inventor of Mickey Mouse, who, by the way, had created this little light bulb that used to be his helper. And it was, for me, like the archetype of a robotic helper that helps you do things on a table and, start experimenting with things, build your inventions, and so on. And interestingly enough, a number of years later, when I was doing my PhD at MIT, my main thesis project was based on a robot that was called Replay, which you can easily find online nowadays. And Replay was a tabletop robot helping you to do things on the table. It was actually a robot that would understand the natural language at a rudimentary level back then. Now we're talking about 2003, 2004, all the way to 2007. It could actually learn the meaning of words through examples. So, what red was, what give me was, wasn't pre-coded, but you actually could go through several examples until it creates a model of the color red or the action verb read, give me or touch and stuff like that. And at the same time, it had the basics of what today we call a world model. So back then, the technical term that I was using that was coming from cognitive psychology was situation models, a special type of mental models as Johnson Laird had introduced them. So you can search for it. You can find even the thesis defense. You can find the thesis itself. It was called Grounded Situation Models for Situated Conversational Assistants. And there's also quite a number of videos of that robot in action, plus some of my later robots. So there's 4 TEDx talks under Nikolos Mavridis, and also one Singularity University talk, if you're interested.
Amazing. And one of the things that really strikes me is the fact that you started from a very early age. And when Agis and I do training of in organizations and in education establishments, one of the things we talk about is the AI mindset and rediscovering that playfulness of this, the playfulness and curiosity to discover the new world and just explore how AI works. And another thing that I thought was absolutely fantastic was the fact that you developed the very first Arab speaking robot. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Correct. So after finishing my PhD at MIT in 2007, the first academic position that I got was actually at the UAU, the United Arab Emirates University. Later, I moved on to NYU Abu Dhabi. When NYU came over, they came and they found me, and so on. And there, I established what we used to call the Interactive Robots and Media Lab, IRML. And you can easily see some of its projects again on YouTube and everywhere. So, one of the major projects in terms of publicity was an Arabic speaking robot named Ibn Sina, after the famous philosopher and polymath and scientist Ibn Sina, who, by the way, was living in the wider region, and in many ways is not only a continuer of Aristotle, but, for example, his medical works, a continuer of Galen in that, which actually now form what they call Unani medicine, which is even practiced, right, in some respects in the region. His medical works were the basic textbook for European universities for the next like 150 years. So it was also an interesting figure in terms of connecting, all of the ancient knowledge through the Islamic world, and again back to Europe in some respects. So that was Ibn Sina. It was a humanoid with facial expressions and some basic hand movements, and quite realistic, as you can see from the videos.
That's amazing. And later on, just to plant a little seed for those of you who stay along for the entire session, you will tell us a little bit about the Philosophobots and how we can reactivate the philosophers of the sages of the past and put them to work for our very modern day challenges. So you are well placed to give us some guidance and some ideas of where things are going in terms of the teams of the future. And I know you've done quite a lot of work. You have some slides for us to share. How do you think the team of the future is going to look like?
Very good. So, number one, just like a small prelude connecting with what I said before, what we're doing back at MIT in 2007, right, which continued with some of my group's publications later and in many other sort of groups around the world, is very much becoming a reality now. Because a lot of the things that could have made it a more widespread reality back then were not in place. So, if you look now at what's happening with physical AI, though, and the movement from LLMs to VLMs to special sort of such architectures that can directly also get input from vision and drive the motor actions of robots. And at the same time, have a look at what's happening with digital twin technology. You will see that slowly the parts are coming in place. So, world models as well as physical AI is a big part of the important developments that will be, I think, on the first line of the news in the next 5 to 7 years. Now, getting back to the work model of the future, let me just share a slide with you one moment.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Is it nicely visible?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So let me start with the following, and then I will also go to very, very specific things regarding the enterprises of today, not only at the level of corporations, but also at the level of small and medium enterprises. And by the way, beyond my academic sort of positions, all the way up to full profile knowledge, I had the experience of pretty much for 3.5 years being at the central position at the SAP Global Center of Excellence for Data Science and AI, and keeping some use case repositories for industrial data science and AI, with clients being either ministries or other corporations or other companies. But we'll get to it in a little while. Now, one of the first things that I would like to say is that although traditionally the work unit used to be the single individual or the team of individuals within a physical building, we're seeing this an enlargement that's taking place lately. So the basic work unit of the future will not only consist of humans, but it will consist of AI agents and other, of course, automotive systems, together with physical AI, be it robots or be it other embodiments and other installations of physical AI that doesn't only do cognition, but also senses the physical world and acts upon the physical world, also through motor actions. Now, these will be partially collocated. I mean, these basic elements of these units, right? But they can also be partially distributed, not only across space, having part of the team, I don't know, in Athens, another part of it in the Silicon Valley, another part of the team in London, and so on, right? But also across time, of course, not only regarding rotations around time zones, but with contributions that might not be synchronous. Also, they will not only be located and situated within physical space, but increasingly there will be interactions taking place not only through a video conference, but also in virtual reality and augmented reality and all of these new mixed reality settings. So this is where we're going to. Now, let me first start with a fun and simple thing that we're playing with lately to give some of the illustrations of some of the next steps. So nowadays you have AI agents that are starting to take over specific, in some cases, even specific roles, even positions, again, with some question marks regarding what this entails within businesses. But beyond that, if you have a look at where things are regarding sort of small group meetings of humans and the role that AI plays there, and this could be, a video conference, it could be a panel discussion in a think tank, it could be an advisory board meeting, and so on. So far, usually we only have AI as a secretary, right? Doing transcription or doing summarization, maybe sending out some emails with action points automatically after the meeting and so on. Now, given that I regularly am invited and attend a think tank that's called Horasis, which is based in Switzerland and originally started by Frank, who used to be with Klaus Schwab. I run panel discussions myself quite often, right, with a number of participants. And one of the questions that I always had was, how nice would it be to be able to have AI also take part within the panel discussions and not just be the secretary, and also participate also in special roles as a moderator, as a creative synthesizer, and so on. And I'll be more specific about which roles are. So originally we started by creating bots which embody, if you want, or try to simulate philosophers. Of course, these bots could be not only philosophers, it could be bots simulating specific politicians or thinkers or other eponymous or even anonymous humans. As a simple example of those, later for the American Philosophical Practitioners Association, I also created these bots that are now part of their front end. So basically, you can speak with Aristotle or Augustine or Averroes or Epictetus before you actually speak with a physical philosopher in their case. But it's very interesting to see what these things can do when they become part of a real panel discussion, even at the high level think tank, right? So this is an example of one of these discussions. This is a panel I moderated in Sao Paulo in the global meeting of Horasis that we had last fall. And it's a pretty simple topic. The topic is, okay, what should we do in order to gracefully advance the fifth industrial revolution? Of course, there's many changes that come out of it. There's a lot of promises, there's risk. But the question is, how can we foster inclusive prosperity, and what can businesses and governments do in that respect? And also, what ethical and societal frameworks would be necessary in order to guide its development? Now, usually what I do is that I first connect with the speakers before the panel and we discuss together and we sort of see where each one of them sits. And then we sit together in front of the audience and run the discussion itself. But let's see now what Lao Tzu, for example, the main person behind Taoism, would say if he was participating within such a discussion. So it's interesting. The Philosophobots start with the principles of the philosophers. If it was Aristotle, then we would be talking about different things. We were talking about purpose, we were talking about eudaimonia, we'd be talking about harmony, and so on. Here, the principles that start in order to derive the answers from them are the Taoist principles for the case of Lao Tzu. So, for example, there's lead like water. Water nourishes all and contends with none. Aim for technologies that augment people rather than replace them. But then this directly translates to actions for businesses and governments. Make human in the loop the default. Measure success by capability uplift, how many worker skills rose, not just the cost saved, and so on. Or balance the bow. Heaven's way lowers the excessive and fills the lacking. Build automatic stabilizers into the tech economy, all the way up to more sort of specific principles for Taoism, like a Wu Wei governance, minimal force and maximal guidance. Okay, still, this looks interesting, but how useful can it really be for the discussion? But see what the rest of the answer was. So, very quickly after the principles, the bot actually started crafting a real playbook for policy, for business and government. And if you have a look at the output of the bot regarding the inclusive design boards, the equity by design KPIs, the time prosperity, all these elements that you see here, these are directly actionable things. And it's not just actionable items for a policy framework, it's also KPIs, right? How do you measure whether you're going in the right direction according to Lao Tzu when it comes to this transition for the fifth industrial revolution, right? And it always finishes too with a very nice poetic ending. In this case, the finishing was build a revolution that doesn't fight its people, but carries them like a great river gathering small streams toward shared abundance. And when technology moves with humility, moderation, and care, growth and justice cease to be opposites and become the same current, which is all quite beautiful. The interesting thing is that if you really start experimenting with including these bots within the board meetings and the discussions, you will see that not only they provide many times insights that have not been covered even by some of the most expert speakers, but at the same time, even if you have philosophers that come from different, if you want, traditions, it is not the case that they will have necessarily contradictory views. But what usually happens is that they complement each other. Now, these bots nowadays can also take the form of real avatars, right? Which not only move and have this virtual physical embodiment, they could be sitting on a screen in the room if you want, but at the same time, they start to have computer vision too. So they can recognize which room they are in, they can recognize the people they're speaking with, they can follow their facial expressions, they can follow their emotional state. And through all of these cues, they can have a much more effective interaction, these like embodied AI avatar bots. The one that I'm showing you here is from a company in San Francisco that's called Tavus, actually. And it's interesting to see how these are starting to be utilized also for customer service, also in order to be able to run interviews and so on. Quite a number of interesting applications. Now, from of course, one can go all the way to the narcissist, the ultimate narcissist dream, if you want, and create a copy of himself, as I have done here, and you can find also the videos. And of course, one can try to craft the character of the bot in specific ways by equipping it with the right type of knowledge and the right type of sort of master prompt dictating who it is and what it does. And finally, one very small thing. So beyond having these bots as participants in these group discussions or the decision-making, crisis management or advisory board meeting teams and so on, you can also have them to play the role of facilitators, to play the role of a creative synthesizer that tries to propose a solution that on the one hand contains elements from what has been said by a number of people in the room, so they actually feel that they have ownership over it, but at the same time is not just a random mix of these elements. It's something that also makes sense overall as a whole and an effective solution. And there's even roles like the role of the king's fool, Trelotu Basilia. For example, in the Middle East, many times if you have a person with very high hierarchy within the room, there are things that you cannot say. But remember, AI can say them, right? So either by playing the devil's advocate or by playing the facilitator or by playing the king's fool or by embodying an anonymous or eponymous figure, AI can start taking part within these group discussions of humans. Okay, so before I continue, let me just
Yes, shall
go back.
we
Yes. Mhm.
shall we pause here for a second because
Correct.
there's a lot to unpack. I'm sure Agis has questions, but I
Mhm.
think this is completely and utterly fascinating that we are talking about specific positions, roles using AI as employees. So they're at the table when we have our meetings, but also at an advisory board level, also capacity. And I think from a marketing perspective, I'd like to pick on the points you mentioned that it could be anyone. And I immediately think that could be our customers. So we could have in the meeting someone, or not just one avatar, not just one AI, it could be more, two, three of our core customers, and they're fed all the data we have, and they are able, before even we as part of testing an idea, to approach them and get their feedback, which I think is fascinating. Yes. How about you, Ayes? What are your thoughts?
So, it's quite fascinating to see the more futuristic applications, and these are really, the real convincing futuristic ones. But I would also like to ask, in terms of, let's say, a lot of organizations and businesses are trying to find ways to implement these technologies, and a lot of them, even bigger ones, are not really, either didn't have successful examples or haven't, they haven't managed to implement it so far. So my question would be, first, where do you start? So you want to make uh, to create something that actually matters, to have an impact. Where would you start?
Wonderful. So let me start first with Celia and then go exactly to what you said, I guess, which is actually a very good lead to the second part of my presentation. So, number one, you're totally right. One of the ways that people are starting to do their sort of their evaluations of their marketing campaigns is to try to create simulated clients and then to be able to run the potential campaigns to them to see what the reactions would be, right? And this is happening more and more, and there's a number of products that are actually in that direction right now. Number two, there's other such cases where it's interesting to have other simulated figures, even in some cases anonymous. For example, imagine a politician needing to go to a negotiation with a group of farmers because of new changes regarding the regulations and the rules for agriculture and so on, right? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to first talk with simulated farmers to get an idea of what their basic stance and reactions would be before you actually move into the real negotiation, right? Again, one more use case. And there's many, many more, right? So uh, slowly, as we're moving also to the more embodied side of things, there are now packages through which you can learn how to optimize, if you want, your presentation skills, even when it comes to the body language, right? Or even when it comes to attending to the audience. And through these packages that will basically monitor your whole body situation during the talk itself, together with a voice prosody, of course, together with a verbal content and many, many other measurements, right? Now,
To
I,
just, sorry,
yes,
but to interrupt, I would
mhm.
like to point out that this is like a great example, right? So we are able to simulate a lot of so possible scenarios, and that actually helps a lot in learning. And you can do it, without disaster effects. If you just try a specific, even in negotiations, let's say, it's always better to be able to understand someone's perspective before even meeting them, and that's a great opportunity. And also in learning, I would say that's also great, because you can have a lot of time of practice, and it's also, let's say, part of the democratization of skills, in a way that everyone can do it. And yeah.
Exactly. And also see then part of the training, for example, if you need embodied skills as a receptionist, right? The way that it is in a hotel, right? For the tourism industry. Then slowly you could start being able to do a lot of the training with sort of simulated clients who are in the avatar form. And beyond the training, you can do the assessment and the testing, right? And so on the basis of that. So there's a lot of interesting things that start when you start to move in the physical space too, and you start to have not only humans collocated in the physical or the virtual space, but also AI agents that can play the roles that would be needed for the situation at hand. Plus, the facial expression recognition and all the affective computing elements. I had the pleasure of having Rose Picard, who started affective computing, as my PhD advisor at the MIT Media Lab. So anything that has to do with computers recognizing emotions, right, or portraying emotions or utilizing emotions, has primary importance, exactly in what you said, in teaching, right, being able to understand the affective state of the student, and also in sales and persuasion, right, being able to see what are the reactions of the potential client to what you're saying. Now, to go to what Ayi, you were saying before too, but all of these are a little futuristic. They're starting to happen. Right now, what we really have is a lot of other applications of AI, and of course, we start to have more and more agentic for a number again of roles in even in call centers and many more things you can imagine. Let me give you a basic idea about how people usually start around these ideas. Let me again share the screen. And this will be, I think, more applicable to some of our listeners. Okay, so I think what is of primary importance, and what I'm saying also resonates with some of the findings of the MIT study that you referred to regarding the not so positive so far back then, like 2 years ago, sort of economic ROI of the introduction of AI in businesses, right? So number one of primary importance is to have specific use cases, right? We're not just talking generically about AI. We're talking about AI and data science, be it sort of LLM based AI or machine learning with other techniques or whatever it might be, right? We want it not for the fun of it. We want it in order to be able to create value. Value ideally becomes tangible value and ROI, but also it becomes more intangible value that might later be translated to ROI. So, for example, if I increase customer satisfaction, right, or if I have other forms of social impact, in which case it contributes to the common good, not necessarily only to the for-profit dimension of an organization, right? Now, in order to be able to do that, you need to have specific use cases. So back when I was doing things for SAP, we divided all industries into 25 categories. So there was, for example, healthcare, which I was keeping the use case repository for. There was defense and security, and there was public sector. There was, shipping. There was discrete manufacturing. There's all of these different areas, oil and gas, and so on. Right now, for each of these 25 sectors, we were keeping a depository of use cases that we had already, in most cases, explored through customers, in many cases implemented. And of course, in a number of them, also the customers had actually adopted them and were using them and were becoming reference customers that were open to speaking with other potential customers regarding their experiences, right? So that's the first thing. And I'll talk about use cases in more detail. For example, if the area could be finance, right? And 6 of the classic use cases are the ones that you see here: fraud detection and prevention, credit risk assessment before you give a loan, sort of customer service automation and chatbots to speak with customers, algorithmic training, and so on, trading. And of course, many compliance use cases. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is to bear in mind that usually use cases get embedded within existing business processes or within existing workflows. I mean, the business process jargon is useful because it connects to all of this literature and methods regarding business process measurement and engineering and so on. And you can also think about workflows per se. One thing to bear in mind is that traditionally these processes worked without AI. They work primarily with humans carrying out different steps of the chain. Now that we're introducing AI, usually we are replacing some of these steps with AI, right? From humans to AI. On the other hand, in many cases, a more radical transformation that might be applicable to certain cases wouldn't just replace steps, but would reorganize the business process in total, right? Taking into account the things that can be done with AI, which weren't possible with humans before. A very simple example, not from sort of the more intangible cognitive sort of elements of processes, but from the physical world, right? See, if I have a warehouse, traditionally, before I had robots, the warehouse was organized in a way that humans, given their specific sort of bodily capabilities, could optimally, ergonomically work inside. Nowadays, that I have robots, maybe and very often it's better to totally reorganize even the physical layout, taking into account what robots can do that humans could not. Of course, in most cases, again, it's going to be a hybrid thing. There's going to be humans and robots, but there's going to be a different redistribution of what one does and what the other, and even a total reorganization. So, number two, not only use cases, but business processes, workflows, and thinking about how you will embed the AI within them. And number three, and that's very important too, again, we need to bridge the technical world, the world of what could be done, with the real needs of the customer or the company that in the end will try out, purchase, and finally adopt, hopefully, the AI innovation, right, that we're talking about. So there, you need to have a nice and systematic way to be able to engage the customer and to get him to, together with you, co-design what would be optimal for him, right? And be more specific on how we do that. Let me call order, right? The basic business process, even an outline of something that you have in most cases, which is the order to pay, in most cases, if you want, process. So there's four levels usually, where the customer searches, for example, online for the product that he was, then he selects it, then he goes through a form to be able to complete the order. Finally, he does a payment, and of course, there's also the reception of the payment that might be instant or it might come later, and so on. Now, the interesting thing to note here is that for this very simple sort of schematization of a very classical process, and there's much more complex ones and industry specific ones, as we shall see, there's already a number of use cases that one can immediately talk about, right? You can start using AI to do customer analysis. You can use AI to help the customer search for the product or service. You can use AI to do product recommendations, right? The classic recommender systems. You can use AI to do fraud detection during the order, to assess the payment risk from a specific customer during the order too, or do the accruals prediction. And finally, to do the payment reconciliation at the end. Also, beyond the fact that in this simple five-stage in reality, business process, there's already like 7 categories of use cases for AI, one can see the different types of data that get involved in them, right? So there's usually what we call operations data, O data, and X data, the experience data, right? The experience data usually are more psychological and have to do with the human side, with the client in this case, right? And the operations data have to do more with things that are within our enterprise systems from before. So, for example, in this case, the click stream, the way that he interacted with the interface, and the customer preferences are X data. The fraud scores and the external scores, again, could be X data if we have a way to see how happy he was at the end, right? With a smile is that he will select as happiness. Again, these are X data. And the other things are the O data. Now, how do we approach a client in order to discuss use cases with him? What usually happens? Well, first of all, usually what happens is that either the client or the AI provider, right, or both, go through use case depositories, which are usually online and many of them open depositories of use cases for specific sectors. And some of them are global and government repositories from the ECD, from UNESCO, from Davos. Others are sort of depositories from big consulting companies, academic repositories, and so on, right? Then imagine, for example, that you're going to a client who is a Ministry of Health, right? Then in that case, you can select 6, 7 use cases that other ministries of health were very much interested in, or even you actually implemented for, right? Then, after presenting them, you actually do a discussion in what we call a use case discovery session. So usually using design thinking methods with these very nice stickers in the traditional form, on the whiteboard and so on, where you write, or in the electronic versions of them. You sit down with a client, usually with a team of 2 to 4 people, some technical, some business. You speak with him about, after recapping on the use case from other clients, you speak to him about his current challenges, and he talks about his pain points. You discuss his strategy and his future vision, and then you discuss the barriers that exist towards achieving this vision that has been set by the client. You brainstorm further use cases beyond the ones that are already on the table, and maybe you modify them too. You prioritize the use cases in terms of feasibility and value and impact, and you create these 4 quadrants that you can see here. And finally, you end up with a roadmap that says, okay, from our discussion, what becomes clear and what the client agrees to and has also helped design is the following roadmap that has, for example, 3 phases. In the beginning, we have some low-hanging fruit that can immediately take place and will provide immediate value. And then we have some more distant things that can happen. We end up with 3 or 4 proposed use cases. And usually after that, you move to a POC, right? A proof of concept, which in many cases happens even, as a free gift to the customer. In other cases, the customer will cover part of it and so on. It takes 1 to 3 months, and it enables the customer to get a preview of what it would really mean to have the full use case that you're talking about. So usually it's a simple, like not really MVP, more than MVP, a restricted version of the full use case with the customer. Of course, to get the POC done, because we're talking about AI, you have to go and see what data the customer has. You have the data need to come back and forth. There's a whole process, right? So this is use case discovery and the POC phase. And after that, usually what we have is, of course, the real implementation of the system, maybe supporting the customer while the system is running, and in many cases also doing special services to the customer in order to help his internal teams take over a big part of what you could be doing externally as a technology provider, right? So there's special trainings for the teams, so you can hand over, and they can even, if you want, further enhance the systems on their own. So another interesting finding from the MIT paper that was mentioned in the LinkedIn post for this talk was exactly that in most cases, although it is good to be able to have flexible and knowledgeable enough internal teams, uh, only in certain of these cases, it would be most proficient to get them to be trained, at least at the stage that we are in right now. For most smaller enterprises, it's preferable to partially train the internal teams, but also keep a big part of the actual support externally to the technology provider. Good. Now, finally, a simple example of what these use cases could be. Again, these are one way to organize them from a depository that I'm showing here. This was actually from an open depository from one of the big tech companies, is across use cases that deal with support and management processes that are common across industries. In this case, HR, procurement, finance, right? The 3 that you find not only in healthcare, you find in defense and security, you find in public sector, you find in shipping, you find everywhere, right? And but these are the specific ones for HR, procurement, and finance for the case of healthcare. And here you have one of the big sort of value chains with 4 business processes within healthcare: health awareness to engagement, the first one, diagnosis to recovery, admission to cash, and so on. And you can see some of the use cases. Now, usually within a depository, if you click one of these use cases, you see more and more detailed descriptions of what exactly it is, what data it needs, how it has been implemented, and so on, right? And what are the real tangible value outcomes of the case. In some cases, you also have benchmarks from existing customers that give real quantitative ROIs, right, if you want. Good. So this is pretty much it regarding how people usually move when it comes to be able to select use cases for their industry and for their company, and then to be able to think about how they will become part of their business processes and workflows. And number 3, how through this discovery process together with a technology company to be able to create a roadmap that will be later followed.
So we have a few comments before we move on to the product side, if that's okay with you.
Hmm.
What I found quite interesting is this aligns very much with what we're seeing in practice with Agis and Nikos in terms of how businesses go about using and adopting AI properly. The idea, there are three key points, aren't they? The initial is the discovery, the use case depository is identifying which areas in my business this will really benefit me. And then it's about training, and that includes training, team training, and leadership training, obviously. And then, of course, we have the application of the actual AI solutions, the bit that Agis and his team does, which is, create something which is tailored for the business. And ideally, and I'm sure that the bigger enterprises that you are normally working with, they start, more strategically, perhaps, from the proper discovery of the use case and what happens. We are seeing exactly as you mentioned, the exact opposite with smaller mid-sized companies. They tend to start from the training side, which is one of the reasons, and we see that a lot, Agis, don't we? And then once, so it's tactical and strategic, is bottom up or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes this way is also okay. And on that note, we have actually developed a framework which we call the AI Superloop. We developed it with the other co-founder, Nikos. And effectively, like the London Superloop, we are saying that, you know what, you can board from whichever point it makes sense in your business right now, and then you move around the circle and again and again and again, because obviously the tools and the solutions become better and better. And obviously training, this is something we all need to keep doing. So what are your thoughts on that, Agis?
Well, it depends on the it often depends on the project you want to do and how the implementation actually works. Quite often, and also depends a lot on the organization and the size of the organization. So we often see smaller companies, but I would say that it depends a lot. It's quite different when you are talking about larger organizations, and quite often these also have a lot more resources than compared to smaller ones. That's not necessarily always the case, though. I'm sure in your career you have seen many large organizations be less open to change and innovation than smaller ones as well. So also depends on the the sector and the team and the people working on them. But I would say that it depends on that as well.
Yes.
So, to complement exactly what you were saying, so first of all, I think what you usually want is a healthy mix of totally bottom up, if you want, experimentation, introduction of AI, together with more like a middle management level, together with top level,
Mm.
right? And of course, the size of the organization makes the weights of these three different, right? Now, when it comes to bottom up, again, even in the MIT report, right, there is already by most employees some at least basic experimentation and some good introductory trainings to generics regarding LLMs and how to do things given where you are and so on. There is already knowledge, and not only knowledge but usage towards being able to simplify some of their tasks, right, and save time and create higher quality results. So at the first level, even without talking about higher level sort of decisions or mid level decisions for specific use cases and so on, you have AI coming in from that direction, and that some of the trainings that are happening in that direction can be extremely effective, right? Number two, there's another question regarding the sort of top level, top down projects, which is the question of how do you really orchestrate them? And number two, how can you try to increase the probabilities of adoption? Again, in the MIT report, you're talking about one of the other, if you want, sort of observations was that, okay, a POC is a different thing than a real implemented project. And in many cases, even if you had such things, they ended up not being adopted. And there's a number of reasons for that, right? So usually you have somebody that will play the role of the AI transformation leader, who is a similar thing to a digital transformation leader for the case of AI nowadays, right? Which has the position and the role and the power and the direct communication with the C levels, in order to be able not only to overlook the technical side of things in implementation, but also to speak with all of the departments, see really what their opinions and attitudes are, and try to do all of these more delicate politics to find sweet ways for things to be introduced, which out of routine, out of fear, out of other types of politics and interests, would not be adopted even if they were there, right? To be able to smoothen out the resistance to adoption, and at the same time, while they're being adopted, to be able to do the right kind of maneuvers to make them most effective, and to keep also the people that are using them happy, if not even happier, right? So these two things. Sometimes it's useful to do the trainings at the low level or to start there, so that employees on their own can start using AI for their specific tasks without any other new systems being introduced, in order to be more efficient and have higher level output. And number two, then there is a difficulty of finding somebody that has the experience and this interesting mixture of technical and political and psychological or organizational skills to play the AI transformation leader. And yes, this is pretty much regarding the two points that you made.
I
Yes.
I would say that these are very useful comments for everyone, and observations. Both that people should be actually encouraged to, to look forward to what AI can bring for them, and also that there should be someone that has the knowledge and the power to actually deliver that. On that note, though, I would say that we are quite past our normal time with this very interesting conversation. So I would think that we should probably create a part two for that.
Yes,
Correct.
absolutely.
So maybe if you'd like to, I can do like a small sort of leading, concluding
Yes,
thing from my side
absolutely,
too. Yes.
absolutely do, because we could talk for hours,
Correct.
and this has been so interesting. But yes, please do share with us your final thoughts.
Correct, correct. So, two things. Number one, what I showed was very much the way we're doing things, even pre LLM times or in the beginning of the LLMs, right? It's how you do use cases for data science and AI overall using other techniques, right? Which are still being used for many things. Remember, LLMs, when it comes to the qualitative stuff and the verbal stuff, are good. But when it comes to some of the more hardcore quantitative stuff, be it different types of optimization and so on, they're not necessarily the best. And now we're starting to combine them with such systems, right? Number two, there's another avenue that many companies get, but usually the bigger ones, but it can happen in smaller ones too, which is to train like a custom company-wide LLM by ingesting all of the digital records and documents that the company has across departments, be it HR, be it procurement, be it internal regulations, compliance documents, and so on, and feeding them to a giant system, not usually through RAG, maybe through a graph database and so on, and then using this system as the base for use cases on top of it. And finally, maybe it's good for me to just give you a very quick preview of some of the things that we could see also the next time, not more than 30 seconds. Sharing my screen again.
Of course,
Did I have
yes.
a spray from current slide? So, okay, the other things that we could talk about, and we could also, of course, make the next talk that we do also more customized to your specific needs and questions. So whoever is watching right now, it's going to be my pleasure, or watching it offline later on YouTube, to actually send us some requests about what you would like to hear about more specifically. So what I had in mind is talking a little more about how you define an AI product, right? and the
Mhm.
different aspects of it through the one of the classic canvases that we use, which of course takes into account also not only success metrics and KPIs, but also the risks and the ethics, clarifying the value proposition and data related stuff. Then some of the main reasons behind failure of AI
Mm.
products, which are interesting to have in mind uh, in order to be able to make sure that they don't take place, right?
Yes.
And finally, some more generic, if you want, although interesting too, previews of what might be possible futures, and especially the desirable possible futures that we could have, given the technologies that we have at hand, in order not only to create ROI, but also in order to, even more importantly, I mean, reach some of our sustainable development goals and create a better world for the children of the world and for hopefully even the children of our children.
And
So
that's amazing because that's AI for good, and that really matters to us a lot, because it can be very powerful technology. It can be used for a lot of bad things, but we are committed in AI for good. But look, thank you very, very much for your time today. It's always fascinating. I always learn new things when we talk with you, Mr. Mavridis. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for the promise of coming back. And maybe we can organize an Ask Me Anything session. That would be quite interesting. So for now, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Agis, and we shall see
Pleasure.
you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
bye bye.